Hello and welcome to part 3 of the building the French Creek branch. My name is Dave Husband and I'm the superintendent of the Wilmington and Northern Railroad. Um, Today we're going to discuss ballasting. We have part 1, we did the laying out of the track and the benchwork construction. Part 2, we did the installing the ties. We're now ready to ballast. Ballast is the rock that goes underneath the track on a real railroad. It has 3 really big purposes. One is it supports the track and distributes the weight and spreads the weight out underneath the track. The second thing that it does is the rocks, the angular rocks, lock together and help keep the track in the same place so it doesn't shift due to heat and cold forces. And then the third thing that it does, and probably the most important, is it is a drainage medium that keeps the track dry and allows water to drain out of the track structure and keep the track structure solid. Um, there are lots of different model ballasts that you can use. One of the most common is the Woodland Scenics ballast. It's actually made out of crushed walnut shells. It comes in several colors and several different sizes, coarse, medium, and fine. It's available widely in a lot of different hobby and craft shops. There's also other ballasts. The one I like to use is made by the Arizona Rock and Mineral Company, and it is actual crushed rock. It comes in a wide variety of colors and several sizes. They usually refer to them as scale by HO, N and coarse or O scale. There's also some other different commercial products that you can get. Some people like to make their own ballast. They either use sand or bird grit or something like that, or else sift their own ballast fines out of crushed rock. If you use sand or something, you can get clothing dye. This is a powder. Actually, the liquid dye works better, but you can get fabric dye and dye your own ballast to the color you want. So that's how you can make the ballast. The one thing I'll say is I tend to use a lot of the N scale ballast, even though I'm in HO, because um, most mainline, what they call D ballast, the large mainline ballast, is somewhere in the 2 to 3 inches in diameter range. And a lot of the HO ballast is coarser than that. So I like to use N scale ballast, especially since most of the work I'm going to be doing here is going to be a cinder ballast, and your older ballasts and your cinder and slag ballasts tend to be a lot smaller of a piece of rock. Ballast goes all the way down to chat, which is used in yards and for walking surfaces, and that's only like a 1/4 inch diameter, so that's very fine. But I will usually take black cinder, some gray yard mix, and in both HO and O, and then I will mix up a big batch that I will use on my layout. I also have a batch of uh, the road ballast color, which is kind of a gray. Uh, the Arizona Rock and Mineral ballast is actual rock. So when you look at the color, it's going to be a little bit different when you install it on the layout because it does have some dust on it, and the dust makes it a little bit lighter than the actual ballast. I'll mention one other thing that there is, and there is sanded grout, and that can be used as for dirt. And if you want to make dirt fouled ballast, mix a little bit of that in. The caution I have with the grout is it contains a colorant in it, and when you use it, anything that you put it on, anything that it touches, is going to have that shade, which if you're making dirt foul ballast is really good, but if you're making just regular ballast, it's not as good. Um, Colors of ballast, there's a whole range of colors. It all depends on the quarry that the railroad used to obtain the ballast. It can go from everything like a cinder or a slag that's almost black, all the way up to limestone or shells, seashells, which are almost white. So there's a whole range of things: pinks, blues, grays, the whole gamut. So look at some prototype pictures, look at what you like, and use an appropriate ballast. Now to fix the ballast, I use regular old white glue. They also sell special ballast adhesives. You can use those, but I find white glue is cheap and effective. I use a mustard or ketchup dispenser, and to mix up a large amount of it, I use about a little less than half glue and a little more than half water, something about 2/5 glue, 3/5 water, to make a very thin gluing material. Some people like to use smaller containers or eyedroppers. Normally, if I'm going to do a bunch of ballast, I'm going to have a fairly large area, so I use a big container. I also use this for a lot of my other scenery materials. Another tool that I like to use is some brushes. This is what we call an acid brush. It's a little metal handled brush for cleaning stuff off. That's good for moving the ballast around. Then I use a white bristle chip brush, one of the cheap ones, also for using it, and then also can be used to pat down and smooth out ballast. And then one other thing that I use is saran wrap, and I pre-drill holes through the benchwork or through the roadbed for my switch machine activating mechanisms. And so what I'll do is I'll take a little wad of saran wrap and push it down into that hole, and that keeps ballast from falling through the hole into the next level, the floor, whatever is below. And last but not least is a spray bottle. And there's all sorts of different spray bottles you can use. Some people like something that's a very fine mister, like a plant mister. The finer your misting thing is, the better. But I had good luck with these. And this is basically water. Sometimes I'll add a little alcohol, and I'll always add a little dishwashing detergent to it, a couple drops of that, to make the surface tension of the water less. The surface tension is important because you're going to spray the water onto the ballast, and if it is the finer drops, the less it's going to try and displace the ballast, and the less surface tension, the more the water is going to soak into the ballast and help it. That's one thing where I like the actual rock ballast rather than some of the ones made from other materials like the walnut shells. Is, in my experience, I have found that the rock ballast actually works better with the water and becomes wetter faster. So your mileage may vary, but that's why I chose mine. So these are the tools that we use and the ballast that we use to apply the ballast. In the next step, we'll actually install some ballast. Here is a section of the French Creek branch, and we're going to ballast this section. I have my tub of ballast that I've made up, that I've mixed up. It's a mix of the N scale and HO scale ballast. And it is the, as I said before, it is the Arizona Rock and Mineral. And I use a spoon, it's an old measuring spoon. And I'm just going to scoop and put some ballast on here, put a little pile down the center. And I want just enough to come up above the center of the track. Okay, so we've got some ballast down there, and we've got some more if we need extra if we need it. Now, the way I'm going to smooth this out is I'm going to just use my finger or my thumb. The one thing I'll mention before we go is that the way I build my layout is I lay the ties first, then ballast, then put the rails on. That way I don't have to worry about getting any kind of ballast in the track or in the rail structure and have to clean out flangeways or any of that other type stuff. So I'm going to just take my finger, and I can use an index finger or my thumb, and I'm just going to ballast plow that out and make that a nice kind of distributed. Now, if you see that you have, you can angle your finger and plow it from one side to the other of the track. If you see that you have too much ballast in one area or another, you can always take your brushes and move it around. So you can use those to distribute it. Then once I get that done, is I'm going to take and I'm going to use my thumb, and I'll just use my left thumb here. And I'm just going to brush it across the tops of the ties. And I'm going to brush all, and I'm going to do it at a little bit of an angle. And once again, I can use any number of fingers. And I'm just going to brush the ballast off the tops of the ties. It takes a little bit of practice to learn, but it's not that hard. You can see the tops of the ties clearly. And then in switches, we're going to go all the way across the switch. Now, a lot of times I will come out from the middle of the switch and do one side, get it off of one side, and then I'll go on the other side of the switch and do the other side of the switch and come off that way so that we don't push all the excess ballast off to one side. Now, if you get a little too much on the sides, you can take your brushes and just pat it. Pat it down. And if you get more, you can easily see where you've got your ballast on top of the ties and get that off. Now around the switch stand, I've built up a little pile of ballast right in here because there's always a little pile of ballast around the switch stand in order to the head blocks for the brakeman to stand while he's lining the switch. I want to have a little bit more in between the two tracks here. And then I want to do a little bit more on, get this embankment kind of thing and make sure that's all covered. So I'm going to add just a little bit more. If you've got too much in any place, you can always come out and scoop some of it out and move it around. And then once I get this, we're gonna and then I'm going to come back here and make sure the tops are clean where I added some stuff back. There we go. Okay, so now I have the ballast all set up the way I want it. There we go. Now it's all set up the way I want it. And the next step is to wet it down and glue it down. In the first part of this, we applied the ballast. Now it's time to use the spray bottle and the glue and affix the ballast in place. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wet down the ballast. Now, if you use a large spray gun like this, since I have a lot of yards and industry tracks and that, I tend to like a little bit coarser spray. If you have a finer spray, you won't get as much on the backdrop. Notice that there's some bubbles. That's from the little bit of dish soap in the water. So we've got that all wetted down. The one reason I like the Arizona Rock and Mineral ballast is that it is, the rock tends to not move around as much when it's hit with the ballast glue. And then I'm going to just dribble a layer of the ballast glue along. I do a line along the edges of the ties. And we've got some where we're going to get a little bit of slopes here, where we've got a slope. That, and then I'll come back and I'll do a real fine line up the center of the track. And then through the switch areas to make sure it's all in. And this area here in the center that has a lot of ballast in it that we want to make sure we get attached real good. Okay, so now, oops, and we're also going to get the team track area that I have here. So I now have this all wetted down with glue. Sometimes if I see a lot of puddling or something like that, I'll come out, hit it with another bit of water just to make sure that it all gets wetted down and that the glue is flowing into the track. One thing that you may have noticed is that from putting the glue across the ties, you'll see a little bit of glue on top of the little puddles of glue on top of the ties. The way I address that is I have a little piece of flat, thin plastic with a flat edge, and I will take that and gently scrape it across the tops of the ties at about a 45-degree angle. And then that removes the little puddles. Get rid of some of the glue off of it. That removes some of the little puddles and the bubbles and that type of thing, and makes the takes all the glue spots off of the top of the ties. And it takes just a few seconds to do. Since we've used our thumb and pushed all the ballast off of the tops of the ties, you can use this and scrape it and it won't affect the ballast. Here is the ballasted area I did yesterday, and it's had time to dry. Notice that the ballast is, I test it to make sure that it all has adhered. It's all nice and hard, so it's all solidly in there. The tops of the ties don't have the watermarks on them anymore, and they are there's no ballast on the tops of the ties. They're nice and clear, so I can lay rail. But any place that did not have the glue hit it, such as right here, it's still got the unglued ballast. So I can take in all the places that were not glued down, I can come along and vacuum that all up and save all that ballast. But all the other ballast that was on the right of way that I hit with the glue, it's down there good and solid. In a nutshell, that's how I apply ballast to my railroad. It's a quick process. You saw me do real time. I did over a switch and about 2 feet of track in just a matter of minutes. And the nice thing about it is I will not have to worry about any kind of ballast getting into the frogs, into the flangeways, on the base of the rail, none of that stuff. I can just lay rail and it'll go down with no worries about the ballast after that. So I hope this has helped you and inspired you to try some of this on your own layout. And next step, rail and switches. Thank you and have a good day.